This
For all.
conference will now be recorded.
Thank you so much, Bukamo, and my sincere apologies for coming in late. Like, even part of what we'll be discussing today is challenges with technology in Africa. And I'm happy and excited that we have so many young people across the continent and also our speakers to uh, give us insightful thoughts and ideas on our topic in discuss today. Once again, I'm Okore Kwechuks. I'm a legal practitioner and also Yarda Nigeria president. I'll be moderating today's session. And gives me the pleasure to introduce to us some of our speakers. Our first speaker today is Mr. Bruno Foy. Just a quick background to some of our speakers. Bruno Foy is the founder and CEO of Zuish, an offensive information security company based in Limbe, Cameroon. Bruno is known for the innovation known as Zoomed, which he created to secure cars, businesses, and homes when the internet was disconnected in his region. Just like we'll be looking at today, internet access is really one of the germane issues, given the fact that young people need to have access to information and, of course, access to be able to innovate and create innovative solutions to address Africa's challenging problems or situations as the case may be. Is innovation Zoomed was created to secure cars, businesses, and homes when the internet was disconnected in his region in Limbe, Cameroon. Its innovation has grown into a new term known as SOT, SMS of Things, in which uses SMS to connect devices, especially as it relates to cars and information security network. Our next speaker is Ulisani Neswiwi. She is the CEO of Lorenico Group. She's an influential woman in business and government, a leader in international trade development and consulting. She's a highly respected entrepreneur who has developed and managed businesses across the continent. She supports, invests, and also develop local-owned businesses, and has been recognized as one of South Africa's influential women in business and government. Ulisani is also the Chief Growth Officer of SolarSwap, and she's responsible for all the strategy, sales, marketing, and other business development related functions of the business. As well, we'll be having Ahmed Bastawi join us for today's discussion. He is the managing director of ICEALEX. He is a mechanical engineer turned social entrepreneur. Believes that grassroots initiatives, especially informal education, are the keys to scaling up social impact. He has founded training initiatives and companies after being involved in different national and international organizations. He currently runs ICEALEX Innovation Hub that supports startups and the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Alexandria, Egypt. In 2011, he founded Two Royalty Training Academy agency to support social initiatives and enterprise in Alexandria. Finally, we'll be having Katie Lockoff. She's the co-founder and CEO of 2050, as well as the founder and CEO of Nistream and director at HQ Africa. Interestingly, she started her first venture, Mango OMC, while completing a BTech in strategic communications at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. And her second venture, HQ Africa, in 2013. Drawing from her combined experience and her love for music, Catherine founded Nistream in 2015, which is hosted on Amazon Web Services. Nistream is an end-to-end platform and is custom built to scale and support multiple white label streams, each branded, curated, and promoted to a specific audience. Ladies and gentlemen, make welcome our panelists and speakers of today. Just a quick one. I'm going to quickly run through the background to give us insight into what we'll be talking about at today's webinar. Like you know, The theme for today's webinar is driving Africa's industrialization agenda by investing in youth digital innovations. Today's world is driven by innovations in digital technology, which is precipitating the fourth industrial revolution in Africa. And Africa is putting in place policies to address potential downsides of the fourth industrial revolution on the continent. Unfortunately, recent events across the globe, including COVID-19 outbreak, crash in global oil price, and slow level of production, have threatened Africa's projected economic growth for the year. Environmental sustainability advocates also argue that decreased level of production has resulted in a concomitant CO2 emission levels, which is unprecedented. We also note recently as well, we also note that countries such as South Korea have been able to optimally utilize technology to control the spread of COVID-19. Now, our first question to our speakers is that in the midst of all the pandemonium created by the outbreak, the outbreak which has led to reduced production, and of course, countries are trying to manage their budget deficits. How do you think Africa can be positioned coming out of this stronger on leveraging technology and other opportunities in agriculture, sustainable blue economy, green growth, smart cities, and all, towards driving the continent's industrialization agenda? Basically, in summary, we're looking at how can Africa leverage technology to overcome the challenges of COVID-19 and associated effects that comes with the outbreak. I would like to address this to our first speaker, Mr. Bruno. Mr. Bruno, if you're online, kindly respond to the question. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Chubbs, and thank you guys for inviting us once more to have this important discussion. Yeah, I'll say that question is really, really important at this point in time, looking at the fact that the COVID-19 and as they call it, the coronavirus has hit the world hard, and Africa not left out. We have Cameroon being affected, most African countries being affected, and this is not only a health problem, it's also a problem that has to do with economy and finances and well-being, and it goes on. Even the governments are affected. What I think we can do is it's a wonderful opportunity. I'm not saying that it's good, but as an entrepreneur, when problems arise like this, that's when we come to our full potential. That is when we should show the world that we care. I think we can leverage technology to help, if not solve this problem. I remember last time I was live on Facebook, and I was showing how we could use SMS, basic SMS, to keep our families and our friends safe. And what I was trying to demonstrate, or what I think all of us here can do, is that the young ones who have access to the internet and at the same time access to their mobile devices can have important information like prevention measures, measures to take when our elderly ones notice an outbreak, and have this information passed over automatically. So I was showing how we could use computer codes, programming languages to automatically have this information dispersed to those who might not be connected to the internet. Because as you know, just 13% of the African population is currently connected to the internet. And we know that the COVID-19 is more information is being spread about it online. Even the WHO is spreading everything it knows about the COVID-19 online. But we have more than 83% of the continent not being online. So I was just basically showing how we could, young ones like us in the continent and even out of the continent, can have this important vital information coming from authorities like the WHO and the CDC to disperse this over to those who might not be online. I think that is not the only thing we can do. We can also go ahead to group ourselves into WhatsApp groups, into create chat chat groups that we can all find disperse information across the continent. That said, Chucks, I think it's also an opportunity for Africa, because a lot of continents are being affected, Asia, the Americas, but Africa is not that affected like the others. So it is a great time for Africans, for young entrepreneurs like us, sitting at a forum, to immediately after this webinar, to create groups and let's start discussing within ourselves what exactly we can do for the continent. What can we bring to the table? What can we do to make sure that those who don't have the right information on time can have that information on time? And I would just like to end there for now, so that you can have the opportunity to go. But if you come back, when we come back, I'm going to be explaining what I did on Facebook Live and how I think the young ones can make use of that.
Thank you so much, Bruno, for that insight. Ulisani, if you are online, please can you give us your thoughts as to how young people can leverage technology to bridge the gap at this particular point in time and create innovative products to address these challenges?
Thanks for the invitation, Chucks. I gave a lot of thought to this question because it's something that is very, very close to my heart for various reasons. I'm involved in a lot of local community initiatives in my country that seek to tackle the problems that people face on a day-to-day basis. So when things like this happen, you actually end up having a deeper understanding of the impact beyond what a media is able to interpret and report on. So everything ends up being, coming to you on a very, very intimate and real level, which most people wouldn't understand unless they are dealing with the issues themselves in their own personal private spaces. So when I saw the question and I, applied it to the South African context, and I think it applies to the continent as a whole, one of the key things that really sticks out to me is that COVID-19 really attacks people, but it's felt throughout communities. So whatever implementation or whatever solution we provide kind of like has to be very community driven, right? I think that when you look at the history of just people and how we're socialized, you'll notice that we tend to look at problems to be solved by a specific leader. And the thing with the virus that we're dealing with is that we all have presidents. We're all in countries that have presidents and mayors and all these little community-based leaders. However, those people are one individual, but the issues that are happening on the ground, and the only way to manage those issues require personal leadership, which is something that's very important, as well as community-driven leadership, because that's the only way we can actually contain the spread of the virus, as experienced in the communities where there have been confirmed cases of the virus. I think what the youth can do is to essentially step into leadership roles in the local communities. That's something that's not really discussed a lot with young people. And by the time it's discussed, young people have become, not so young anymore. You're now a manager in a company. You have other obligations, and you end up having to choose between being a leader, which takes a lot of time, and a lot of the time doesn't come with the economic benefits of, say, taking a different route or a different career path. So I strongly encourage young people to just consider taking up leadership roles in the community, which will help us adopt more proactive approaches to dealing with problems such as the COVID-19. The second thing that I think needs to happen is we need to take a different approach to how we run our economies. A lot of attention is being paid to the health challenges faced by people who are dealing with COVID-19. However, beyond those people who actually have the virus, there's the economic impact, which is obliterating entire industries in some communities. So what we need is to see young people using technology to kind of find new and interesting ways to generate income, right? And I think that when you look at what technology does to an individual's life, it allows you to interact with essentially the whole world without physically being there. And unfortunately, COVID-19 kind of forces us to not be able to be in the physical spaces we'd like to be in. So young people have that advantage in that we already interact with technology at different levels. So I think we'll be the ones who are, in best placed to take advantage of how we can kind of move the economy forward, where we lead more on technology or integrate technology into our day-to-day businesses and jobs and our schooling and education systems. And the little tools that we will use to integrate our education and our work will develop our young people, because we are best positioned to develop those solutions. So I think as much as the pandemic is creating a lot of pain and chaos, I encourage young people to kind of look at, okay, a lot of kids can't go to school. What can I develop to deliver schooling solutions to them? A lot of people can't go out to buy food, right? What can I develop to get food to people that relies on technology, that kind of distances us from each other physically, but still bridges that gap through the use of technology? So, I mean, I think that's the two main things that young people should really start thinking about over the next coming weeks as the virus spreads and as we try and find ways to position ourselves for growth. The first thing being encourage yourself and motivate yourself to be a leader where you are. And secondly, think of ways to connect people to solutions, even in your own community. I have a young friend in India who I'm mentoring. And, I don't know if you know, but India's under complete lockdown. So for them, traveling and getting their essentials is very, very difficult. However, this young man is now taking telephone orders for food because one of his family members has I think it's a fruit and veg grocery store. So he's taking telephone orders from his community. He's spoken to the local police to say, I'll be delivering vegetables from my uncle's warehouse during this thing so that people don't have to go out. And in that way, he's kind of bridging the gap between a human need and the solution to that problem. And he's using literally his cell phone to make money and solve a problem and keep people safe. So those are some of the simple things that young people can do to help stop the spread of the virus, and also find solutions that we can use and scale up after the virus to kind of move humanity forward.
Wow, thank you so much, Lusani, for that wonderful thought. Ahmed Bastawi, do you want to add a few things to what she just said?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks first for inviting me over here, and it's an interesting face, and I'm happy seeing all of these faces or like videos on the webinar. So actually, speaking about the fourth industrial revolution and with the synchronization of what's happening today, it's all about, from my point of view, we shouldn't speak about technology only, but also the mean or the bottom line here is putting people at the center, and it's about solidarity and empathy. So with the COVID-19 outbreak, I would like to share some points of views, like radical points of views maybe, but actually it's an invitation for all of us to slow down and rearrange our priorities, right? Since entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs are always welcoming challenges, as Bruno was mentioning at the beginning. So this challenge actually could be seen as a new source of inspiration for a lot of innovators, young youth across the continent, and a trigger for more opportunities as well. So basically, we have to admit that capitalism is not helping the world at that point. That's why I believe so much in impact-driven startups, and this should be the future for Africa, actually. And instead of just maximizing profits at crisis times for shareholders, as the economic basics or principles tell, it's about redefining values for everyone in the supply chain. It's about empathizing, but not just creating jobs, but opening the door for decent jobs, but also better jobs and fair opportunities for everyone in the chain, right? And also, instead of just pushing mass production products that don't speak to the customer needs, it's about creating human-centered but customer-tailored experiences. And here comes the role actually of not just industrialization, but rather an opportunity for decentralized manufacturing, where actually homegrown innovations coming from young youth could take place, and instead of just like mass production facilities or like big corporates who are not actually today able to help us in the situation where we are all in. So it's not about birthing luxurious products, but rather creating essential inventions that would change the way people live and responding to their pains and becoming the voice more or less for the base of the pyramid, which is basically the people. And that's why I believe in impact-driven entrepreneurship again. And actually, yeah, so instead of expecting just to be just receiving the results of the economic growth that is now slowing down or in recession phase because of the COVID-19 outbreak, but rather like young youth in Africa could actually be in the driving seat and create a lot of growth and opportunities using actually purpose-driven ventures that are being created at the moment. It's not easy, but like actually it's very doable.
Thank you so much, Ahmed Bastawi, for your amazing thoughts. Basically, you're looking at a solution whereby young people across the continent can come up with purpose-driven innovative products that would be more focused on impact rather than on profit and increasing shareholder value. Captain Lokov, I don't know if you are on. Could you kindly share with us your views on how young people on the continent can leverage technology, given the circumstance of the COVID-19 and the resultant effect on the continent?
Absolutely. So good afternoon, and thank you so much for having us. It is always difficult to be the last panelist to speak on this topic, especially if you have such eloquent panelists to share a stage with. So I'd like to echo everything that's been said before and perhaps underline a few things. The first is, I think, as everyone could agree, this is a completely unprecedented situation we find ourselves in. I have spent the most of the last 2 weeks wondering what kind of alternate universe I've been dropped into and how this happened so quickly. And I think that's a great example of, if you go back and you start doing the research of how often pandemics were predicted and how technology was used for that, and how we certainly as governments didn't prepare for this. It's a great example of how we need to start taking our scientists, our data scientists and our technologists more seriously, our medical professionals, those in the know. I think the thing that I'd like to underscore especially is that the youth is in a position, as said before, to share information with those who don't necessarily have access. But most importantly, and something I've been super passionate about the last couple of weeks, is to share accurate information, to understand that what you're sharing is true and that you can reference that source. Because I think a big thing about our world today, over and above capitalism, over and above kind of the meme culture, is just the spread of false information and the idea that we all need to be promoting ourselves. If there's anything we're going to learn from this, is that collectively, between us and the technology that's available, we're going to be able to solve problems we haven't been able to solve in the past. If you look at just how technology is being used to solve or predict and determine solutions for COVID-19 the world over, you know, whether it's computational predictions of protein structures, or using facial recognition for fever detection, or looking at machine learning to predict survival rates and mortality rates, or I mean, they even have disinfecting robots in China, for crying out loud. And I think that inevitably we're going to be using this scenario as a dress rehearsal for what comes next. So don't think of this as an isolated situation. Start thinking about how can we use a crisis like this, and how can we partner with the technology that exists now and the technology that's in development, and how can you start capitalizing on what this means for us and for you as youth. You know, I'm 38 now, so I think I don't qualify as youth anymore. But what does that mean in 20 years' time, in 5 years' time? And so much of what we thought was real, if you think about the companies that are starting to feel the impact of this, you know, bricks and mortar, the tourism industry, travel, etc., and how other businesses, online shopping, for example, is starting to take a big upswing. What are the gaps between the fielders that you didn't see before? And from where you're sitting and what you're seeing in your day-to-day life and from the research you're doing, how can you apply that? And what does that mean for uplifting not only yourself or your immediate community, but just Africa as a whole? Because I think there is so much potential here, and it's going to be up to us to really show the world that we can actually capitalize on that.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for your amazing thought. Definitely. As young people on the continent, we are looking forward to capitalizing on the opportunities and ensuring that we increase or spur development even across our local regions and, of course, the continent as a whole. Speaking of which, Bruno, you would agree with me that since Africa has the youngest population in the world, and it has been estimated that by 2025, the continent's youth population, those aged between 15 and 24, will be more than double the 2015 figure of 226 million. And in the same light, Africa is currently about 167 million currently 167 internet users, and these users are predominantly young people, and these young people are innovators, and of course, they're also contributors to Africa's growing digital economy. Now, as a young person on the continent of Africa, how can I position myself, to contribute to Africa's industrialization agenda? And then what available opportunities do you see in the Africa's growing tech space, given your experience in the industry?
All right, Chuck, thank you so much for that. A very interesting question. Yeah, everything you've said, all the data is true. Africa is really naturally positioning itself to take over the world, and we need the young people. We need the young guys to do the job. If you look at the history of the Americas, you look at the history of Europe, you see that they took into consideration what they had. They made use of that, and they are world powers today. Take for example China. China realized the importance of technology, focused almost all of its investment in that, and look at China where it is today when it comes to technological development. Now, I think Africa naturally has put itself in a very, very suitable position. What we need right now is for the young people to take advantage of this. And I will tell you, Chuck, that in my interaction with the young guys in Cameroon and in other African countries, most young Africans are afraid that their ideas, their solutions are not good enough. They want to create something like the next flying car. But I say this, that no matter what you do, no matter how small it is, what is important, like it said here, is for you to have an impact. Who is going to benefit? Is somebody going to benefit? It must not be 1 million people. It must not be 1 billion people. But if 100 or 120 people, 200 people can benefit from your solution, from your ideas, then I said it's worth doing. Another thing where young Africans are scared of is the young Africans are procrastinators. They say, okay, I'm going to start next month. I'm going to start when the conditions are perfect. I'm going to start when I have my company registered. I'm going to start when I have everything suitable for me. I said, no, don't do that. You can start right now, today. It's not like start tomorrow. Start right now with what you have and where you are. You must not be in South Africa. You must not be in Morocco. You must not be in Cameroon. Wherever you are, start right now. Another thing I like to bring for Chuck, if you allow me, is the fact of creativity, innovation and creativity. A lot of young Africans are creative people. A lot of young Africans I come across are innovative. But the problem is forming a team. Africans, most of us don't know how to work in as a team. We want to keep our ideas to ourselves. We want to create something alone. If you look at great guys like Elon Musk, if you look at Bill Gates, they always have someone. They always have someone or a team of people that they work with to make their idea to what it is today. So if we as young Africans can come together, create a forum of maybe 4 or 5 people, and we have a single idea, a single goal, a single problem that we want to solve, I think that will go a very, very long way to help us. And you've just given me date of 2055. 2055 isn't coming tomorrow. So if we want to get there, if we want to be the leaders by that time, let's start right now. Let's start right now and start doing the things, putting ourselves in position for this progress. I also want to just use this opportunity to talk about what Zoix, my company, is doing to help during this COVID situation. We have, first of all, put in place an application called SIVA, which stands for SMS Interrelated Server, which allows anyone with a basic Android device to basically have an SMS gateway of their own, and they can spread out information as the last speaker said, verified information to those they love. We've also relaunched an application that we discontinued in 2018, which allows everybody to be at home and attend school. And we've also added the opportunity for people to attend schools even without internet. So we've added an SMS feature where course information can be sent to you by SMS over a period of time. So like you said, Chucks, we have everything to beat the world when it comes to industrialization and technology. We have everything. We have the opportunity, we have the right, it's the right time, it's the right place. Everybody in the world is looking at Africa right now. China investing heavily in Africa. CEO of Twitter wants to move to Africa. Everybody wants to come to Africa. And the reason is because they have seen the potential, they have seen the future of this continent. But unfortunately, we Africans ourselves, we are not seeing that. All of us want to move over to Europe. We want to be in America. It's not bad to move over. It's not bad to go to travel the world. But it is if you are abandoning opportunities, wonderful opportunities like what everybody else is seeing. So my advice to young Africans and to myself is that let us take this seriously. Nobody's going to come out of the blues and make the Africa that you want. Nobody's going to do that for you. You have to do that yourself, and you have to start today. It's not like, oh, let me wait for every situation to be okay. Take, for example, the former speaker spoke of a young Indian who is using the COVID situation to have orders placed over the telephone. What does he need? A simple phone, which I believe everybody on this platform has. A simple phone, and he's making ends meet. But you see, the governments are going from social distancing, and I think if this continues, it will be complete shutdowns of cities, of regions, of countries. What do we do then? How do you feed? We have to make ends meet. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Bruno, for your thoughts. Indeed, Africa is the next best thing, and we need to encourage more Africans to stay back and also put in place an environment that attracts Africans who are already in the diaspora, who are willing and able to, contribute substantially to the development of the continent. Now, going back to innovation, technology, and of course, sustainability, Ulisani, I just want to ask this basic question. You would agree with me that one resource that the continent can really boast of, is the sun. From Cairo to Cape Town, almost all year round, you have access to the sun, and this has been a huge resource on the continent. So as well, there have been several proponents of shift from fossil fuel owing to its devastating effects on the environment and of course climate change to renewables. But others fear and argue that such energy source, solar, biogas, wind, and the likes, they are not reliable. So in your view, what gradual change do you think Africa can begin to put in place to ensure that the continent's industrialization is built on renewables, and given the fact that there are enormous potential that Africa could derive by shifting to renewables?
I think I'm going to answer your question in two parts, because energy is a factor that's in all of our lives, and it kind of affects every single element of your life. So I want to touch on the energy specific side of the question, and also more just to give a more global view of what I think Africa needs to do immediately for the sustainability of our continent outside of, just looking at the energy stream. To answer your question, a lot of people have this perception that renewable energy, whether you're looking at wind or solar, is unreliable. And the reason they feel that is because, there are days where it rains in Africa, okay? And there are days where the winds, won't be right to produce the required energy from a wind turbine. So that's where the perception that energy is not, or renewable energy is not reliable, because the supply is not constant or at a constant measure all day long, right? Because we're relying on nature. However, when you look at the solar industry or the wind industry, the introduction of battery storage or energy storage has really been a game changer, and it kind of makes the argument that renewable energy is not reliable moot, because where before, when the battery or energy storage industry was not at the level it's at right now, of course the energy that you got was whatever you got while it was while the sun was shining, if you're speaking to solar energy. However, now that we have very advanced energy storage systems and solutions in place, some of them having been tested by the leading companies in the world, I can confidently say that renewable energy is as stable, and in some cases more stable, than any energy source that anybody on this webinar is currently using, including South Africans, because South Africans know that we have coal, right, which is, as old gets in terms of energy supply. And even with our coal powered plants, we don't have reliable energy, we don't have stable energy. And people are now actually moving away from the coal energy to the solar energy, just so that they can have something that they can count on. So I think that with the introduction of energy storage, we'll see a massive and very like a growing shift towards people taking up renewable energy as an energy source of choice for their business and personal energy requirements. In terms of what young people or just Africans in general can do to look at or to be a part of that development, I'd say that I want people to kind of start looking at what energy products are available in the market where they are. Because Africa doesn't have the world's best energy infrastructure, the energy that's selling the fastest in Africa right now is actually renewable energy sources. And a lot of it is solar, because solar is the cheapest for personal use, right? So I want people to kind of look at what's available in the market right now, and can they get their hands on those products? And if they can't, for them to kind of find a way to start getting their hands on those products, so that even in your own personal private life, you now start moving from intermittent energy to full-time access to energy, because it is affordable at this point in time, and it is largely widely available. And if anybody needs some assistance in that regard, I'm sure Chooks would be happy to give you guys my email, right? But to move away from the energy stream, because to me, sustainability is not just, hey, look at your environment, stop using plastics, because, those things are very, very important. But they're not the only elements of sustainability. To me, one of the most critical elements of sustainability, especially in Africa, actually is linked to our method of industrialization. This COVID-19 thing really, it really lit a very specific area of our economy across the continent that has a lot of lip service, but not a lot of actual attention. And that's Africa's ability to produce products and services to service the continent. As it stands right now, Africa is a net importer of most of the goods that we need, and it's not sustainable. What really, really, really scared me about the coronavirus, how fast it's spreading, is that medical manufacturers are saying they're running out of stock of core and essential medical devices that we need to kind of combat this pandemic. And news reports are saying that most of it is manufactured in China, and China has used a lot of their stock, and they're hoarding the stock that they do have. They're donating 1,000 units here, 10,000 units there, but we don't need 10,000 units in South Africa alone. We need a lot more than that. And it's the same across every country in Africa. And we are where we are right now, where our citizens' lives are in danger because we've outsourced our essential manufacturing to the cheapest service provider, which is good for your bottom line in the interim, but it's not good for the sustainability of any of our countries, and it's not good for our social security, right? So what I think what we can start doing is, as governments, right, and as people who contribute to policy and entrepreneurship, and even just people who have jobs, you can still contribute to the conversation. We need to start saying that in our countries, some manufacturing, some products have to be considered essential products. And we know what those are, whether it's corn or mealie meal for food, right? And essential healthcare products. And those things cannot be outsourced to a third party simply because they're cheap. We need to have the capacity in each of our countries to take care of ourselves in the event of an emergency, because now we have an emergency and other countries are in a desperate situation. So countries are at the bottom of a very long list, because after their country, they're going to sell it to those who can afford to pay. So we can imagine where Africa sits on the priority list. So for us to move away from that vulnerable position, we need to manufacture those things ourselves. And that's something that we need to drive as citizens, to say to government, if you're not going to prioritize our social security, we don't want you to be our government anymore. We'll put somebody in who will prioritize the social security. And in adopting that position, we'll then start to see a turnaround, because now we're not just outsourcing manufacturing to the cheapest service provider. We're forced to manufacture a number of items and foodstuffs locally. So that solves the jobs problem. That solves the innovation problem. That solves the security and crime problem and the healthcare problem. So a lot of problems can be solved by us looking at this current pandemic and saying the solution actually comes from us insourcing and taking care of the essential things that we should have taken care of anyway. So when we think of sustainability, I want us to stop thinking about hugging trees and being more green in the how we buy, but also in how can we be sustainable as a system. What systems can we put in place that mean that Africa is more secure? Because I'm telling you now, one of the speakers said Africa doesn't have a lot of COVID cases, and I really thank God for that. But if we do become like the other areas of the world, no one's coming to help us. No one's coming to sell masks or ventilators to us. And we are in a very, very serious position. And we put ourselves here. I read an article a couple of days ago where these guys at home, they're not, entrepreneurs, they're young tech guys. They manufactured, I think they said the ventilators at home using their own 3D printers, and they gave them to hospitals for free. And while they are being sued by the patent owners, but that's a whole other story. The point is, these guys sat at home, they looked at the design of the ventilator, and they 3D printed them at home. Stuff like that shows me that the barrier to entry is not as high as what people think it is. The previous speaker before me, Bruno, he said, sometimes we say, I'll only do it when I have this, because we put all these mental blocks to say, I can't do it because I don't have A, B, C, D, E in place. However, that little news story that speaks to one of the critical medical devices we need to kind of combat this pandemic is being printed at home by young tech guys in Italy. So maybe the barrier to us moving Africa forward to manufacturing essentials in Africa is not as high as what we think it is. And it's not as high as what it was even 5 years ago. So I really want us as young people, because a lot of us maybe won't have access to the money you need to open a factory tomorrow. However, there's creative things we can do to maybe pool our resources together and open factories, or vote in better leaders who direct funds towards local economic development instead of just lining their own pockets. So I think as young people, especially because in the near future, we will be the majority, we need to start thinking strategically and say, listen, if you're not going to serve me and my community, you need to just get out. Whether you're a politician or a business leader, we're not going to support you. If you're a business leader who imports 100% of the things you sell, we're not going to support you. You know, as young people, we have the numbers to force the market to behave in a way that serves us in our countries. And we really, really need to start doing that. And if we do that, I think even within a decade, Africa will be a vastly different place. We don't need to be taking handouts from people because we have the market, we have the number of people, we have the number of consumers who can consume products, which means we can create the value in our own markets. So when we think sustainability as young people, I want us to start saying, if you're not sustainable, I'm not supporting you. If you're not supporting my local community, if you're not employing local people, I'm not supporting you. If you're not manufacturing locally, I'm not buying from you anymore. And then we just keep building on that and start building factories, businesses that bridge the gap between the market needs and the supply available in our specific markets.
Thank you so much, Lisani, for your amazing thought on this, especially on the fact that we need to look inwards and create product, essential commodities for the African market. Ahmed, if I can move straight to you, just like Lisani rightly said, we need to in-source in the sense that we need to keep the jobs here. We need to increase our production capacity here to be able to create jobs, and of course, we have the markets here where we can easily, supply to. The market is available here. Let me quickly ask you, looking at the fact that currently Africa is experiencing rising rate of unemployment, and some people, school of thought have suggested that we may need to create a continent that has an entrepreneurial hub where young people can develop market-driven solutions, just like you rightly said earlier, that addresses the challenges of unemployment and, of course, create innovative products to drive Africa's development agenda, towards achieving the African Union Agenda 2063. Now, if I may ask you, how do you think young people can leverage these opportunities? Bruno had said so much, Ulisani has said so much, Catherine has said so much. How do you think, or what do you think young people can do to leverage these opportunities, given your experience in running innovation hubs?
Well, so when we say young people would do all of that, actually it sounds like great pressure on their shoulders, but actually we have seen it happening over the years with true entrepreneurs and like samurais taking that further and like creating jobs for even people around them, and like changing the reality actually that people didn't see or foresee before. And actually, according to some of the statistics here of one of the researchers done a couple of years ago, that basically more jobs were being created by SMEs that are newly established than the older ones that have been in the game for so many years. And that's playing a central role in creating these kind of jobs and enhancing the growth and innovations here. And one of the things that is happening across the continent, and we can see it across our narrow circles even, is basically the emergence of innovation hubs and entrepreneurial spots or centers and incubators and accelerators that actually are youth-led as well, not only like just being created by government, because this has been raising the attention of huge organizations and the government recently, but not being created initially by them. It's about like basically if you don't have your own job, but like rather you see a lot of challenges around you, and here is the trigger of why not to step in and start basically steering the whole chain into creating innovations that would tackle these challenges. And this is the beauty of it, right? Because it basically speaks about real kind of challenges that people are facing in their daily life, not just like copying and pasting, However, on the other side, so one of the frustrations I've been seeing a lot is basically that our youth around the continent here are always looking for the Silicon Valley model, or like the venture capital model that is basically always producing unicorns. But this is not the reality in Africa, and shouldn't be the reality at all, honestly speaking, because we have a different path and also a completely different kind of magic base. Like a lot of resources, a lot of talent, amazing goodwill, but maybe not being seen anywhere else, or maybe on some cases. But like what we need to start focusing on is having more stamina, but also work in teams, as being mentioned. We have seen that happening across the innovation hubs and the entrepreneurial hubs across the continent, that teamwork has started to become the center of the game, because if you don't integrate what we do, and this is what we will see, by the way, after the COVID-19 kind of crisis as well, eventually over, that a lot of integrations should happen, a lot of merging and acquisitions that would happen on the scale of startups, not only on the big scale of the game. So having the mentality of long life learning and having an enabling ecosystem, because we shouldn't put only the pressure on youth to create startups, to be self-employed, but also create jobs for others. That is already happening. But also we have to raise the flag here that a lot of supporting elements should be raised and developed in order to make that happening more and more and scaled on different levels. And what we have seen in the employment sector coming from the entrepreneurship era is basically that jobs are not defined anymore by job descriptions that you have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then to get these things being accomplished, but rather with job responsibilities, and hence enabling more kind of leadership and professional growth for young youth, instead of just being employees that are following the job description, but rather like creating these spaces for them in the multidisciplinary perspective. And also, instead of just having the 9 to 5 job that is everywhere, that is changing actually, because entrepreneurship is enabling more kind of flexibility for creating harmony as well between life and work, and allowing huge learning opportunities when people are learning by doing, but also exploring more challenges, but also more responsive to what's happening around them. Because as being mentioned earlier, maybe Helisani was mentioning that. So what we are seeing right now at these days, big industries and big corporates are not able to move as dinosaurs and goers in the game to tackle these and become agile for that, but rather startups and innovators and change makers. So the 3D printed masks, for example, are being done not only in homes, but also in maker spaces and fab labs across the continent here in Africa and also other places. And the open source files are being shared virtually, so other maker spaces could take the files and then reproduce them, and then they could help the hospital systems across their neighborhood. So I would basically summarize that there are a lot of opportunities for personal and professional growth for young people, not only to be employed in startups, but also to create their own jobs and different jobs. Because here, what we see now is basically the invitation to have better jobs that are responding to the harmony that we need between life and work, because I don't believe so much in work-life balance. It's rather harmony. So this harmony is basically so much needed. And this will never happen without like basically a clarity in mind and basically integration of resources, talents, and different kind of innovations that would happen only because entrepreneurship is there. And I would stress again, it's not only entrepreneurship, but also purpose-driven entrepreneurship.
Thank you so much, Ahmed, for your wonderful thoughts. Catherine, if I can get back to you now, you would agree with me that young people plays an important role in the development of the continent, given the fact that over 75% of the continent's population, is under the age of 35. Now, given the growing trend as well in digital technology, such as cloud computing online music streaming, smart cities, IoTs, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and the likes. In what ways do you see young people taking advantage of these niche areas in technology?
Thank you, Chucks. Yeah, I guess I would start by saying that I really wish I was 20 years younger. So much has changed and so much of technology has been democratized, whether it's access to cloud tools and rapid innovation tools and AI tools that make solutions that were previously required, very expensive resources and large teams of data scientists to solve. We now have the ability to access these tools through Google and Microsoft and AWS, for example, that certainly weren't available before. If you look at startups like My Intelligent Machines that are using genomic precision for livestock production needs, and how we're starting to solve problems in healthcare by making sure we use tech to do more with less, right? So ultimately the ability to triage and decide who gets care first and post-care follow-up as well as diagnosis and so forth. There are a number of really extremely brave startups out there that are starting to capitalize on problems that I guess the older generations who are more set in their ways don't necessarily always recognize. And that may be in areas of, cybersecurity or blockchain, IoT, even 3D printing, although it didn't take off as wildly as everyone thought it would. Between 3D printing and biotech and robotics and energy storage, as we spoke of earlier, there's so many opportunities. There's an enormous amount of investment coming in. If you look at what AWS is doing with their triple EIP, that's 365 million South African rands. Microsoft is investing 100 million into African AI centers. And these are mostly looking at investments into youth-led, or I would say kind of, if youth is considered under the age of 35, then youth-led enterprises. And I think that some of the very fun ones we're seeing out there and the ones that are solving some big problems are the Fin chatbot guys, as well as Kudi in the financial tech space. In the agri-tech space, we're certainly seeing the guys from Aerobotics and We Fly Agri. I, for example, mentor a startup out of Nigeria called Seed Money, who's essentially looking at investment into seed production, but ultimately using AI and blockchain to start predicting where will demand be, and how we're able to offload that produce at the end of the day. There are other guys like Rapid Deploy and Effectiva who are looking at facial recognition. There's obviously a lot of politics and things around facial recognition. But, I'm aware of a team that very quickly, using just AWS recognition in a week and a very simple $100 Android tablet, was able to build a facial recognition tool for sign-in at reception desks. We can rapid prototype and make it easier for people to access this. And I think the big thing here is the ability to think outside the box. If you think about how just the world of work is changing, for us, for example, this going into remote work hasn't been difficult. We've been remote working for a couple of years now, with South Africa being in complete lockdown, and we see the larger, bigger organizations led by considerably older people just really scrambling. The example of this webinar being able to happen on GoToMeeting and tools like Zoom just goes to show that the youth are able to embrace that far quicker and with a lot more agility than anyone else. One of the really incredible projects, and I encourage everyone to take a look at, is a project that Zindi's running. They've just registered 12,000 data scientists across Africa to collaborate to find solutions for COVID-19. 12,000 people that have signed up in the last couple of weeks to try and see how we find solutions. And, at the end of the day, I think for youth to take advantage of their unique perspective, potentially not being as stuck in their ways, their ability to understand and engage with technology in a much more agile and comprehensive way, and the ability to start looking at what are the Lego blocks out there, how do we put them together? How do we use cloud technology and UI toolkits like Flutter and React to build solutions that otherwise you would have needed massive teams and a lot of time and an extraordinary amount of money for in the past. And it's a really great time to be alive. And I think the big thing now is we may be faced with immense human suffering, impending suffering and economic downturn, etc. But if we can look at the upsides, we can try and find solutions. And I think those are the niche markets that the youth should be focusing on.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for your amazing thought right there. Back to Elisani, you earlier spoke about creating the right mix of innovation, technology, and sustainability. As a young person on the continent, how do you think we can engage policymakers to ensure that they do not just implement policies, but implement policies that strictly address the needs of the youths in their immediate environment?
Um, that's a very, very good question, Chugs. You know, I actually, when I was in school, I was involved a lot in politics. Um, and, you know, unfortunately in Africa, and I guess the whole world, our leaders are one of two categories. You get like your political leaders, and then you get your business leaders, right? So we can call them like your economic leaders. And one thing I've learned in engaging with the political leaders, and I found out the hard way when I was, you know, employed in the financial services sector, is it's the exact same mindset in with your economic leaders, and it's something that Catherine alluded to, which is in those environments, leadership is assigned differently to how it would be in a more neutral space. And the people who are leaders often don't have a mindset that is aligned to, uh, you know, the broad base of people, which in Africa is actually the youth. So I think that there's a lot of ways and there's a lot of things we can do to try and chip away at those old blocks. But I actually, to take from Ahmed, I think we should take a more radical approach to the problem. And I think that we should, you know, when we were young, there's this thing where they say if you can't go over it, then, you know, just go under it. I think because we can't go over these old leaders, you know, there's some presidents in Africa who've been presidents since before I was born. You know, how do you surmount issues like that? And maybe instead of trying to surmount them, we literally go under them, right? So where they have these established systems across sectors, we use technology, we use our ingenuity, and we use the fact that we are the majority to create our own financial systems, to create our own marketplaces, to create our own buying groups, our own manufacturing groups, because we have the numbers, we have the ingenuity, and we have the energy to kind of like drive these things forward. You know, something as simple as in my country, there's this concept of these little stokvels, right? And a stokvel is like a buying group where every month you put in a small amount of money, and then once a year it becomes your turn. And because you put in a little bit of money, you know, every month, when it's, you know, your turn on the queue, so to speak, you have a large sum of money that you can use to invest in something or buy, you know, buy stuff. And I think we can borrow from that collective, you know, collective, you know, building system to kind of build our own systems across our lives, right? So that means in our personal lives, in our work lives, in our social lives, in the economy. We can come together in small groups, in big groups, and just say, because you refuse to speak to me, Mr. President, because you refuse to give me a job, Mr. CEO, we're going to come together. We, you know, we all have families. Let's say you're a group of 10 kids, right? We all have families, and because it's in Africa, you know, the family is large numbers of people. I'm going to speak to all my family members, and you know, maybe we'll buy all our bread from my group. Baking bread is very easy, guys, right? So that's why I chose that example. We can say we'll buy all my bread from my group, and in that way, my group of 10 friends, we now have a little bread making cooperative, and it's a business, and we have a guaranteed market, you know. And after we have that little market of just our 10 families, we can then, you know, knock on neighbors' doors and say, hey, listen, would you like to buy bread from us? We employ the kids in the community. You know, we're doing a good job. This big bakery there in town, they refuse to employ us. Let's employ each other, because we have the market and we have the means to produce the goods that we need. You know, it's right here in front of us. And I think when we start adopting that micro solution driven approach to the problems we face, Africa is going to be radically changed. You know, a lot of the solutions we want, and I really am going back to what the first speaker said. Hang on, Bruno. He said the solutions we want are not as far away as what we think they are. And I think once you meditate on that and you really dig deep and you think about it, we can create our own little shops, right? We can create our own little home industries. And it sounds so stupid until you do it and you're making a couple naira or a couple kwacha or a couple rands or dollars. And then because you have a little bit coming in, you get the wisdom because you're now in that space. You get the wisdom to grow it, guys. So I implore you, I'm trying to motivate you, I'm begging you because I'm an African and this means a lot to me. Instead of looking to big CEOs who don't care about you and presidents who don't read your 100th open letter, fine, let's go under them. You know, we all have friends, we have massive families, we have communities. We can do basic things. So let's do those basic things. We can't do them on our own because we don't have money, right? There's a lot of money available. There's a lot of investment that's available, but the investment, I would know. I've been in financial services. I run a financial services company, so I know. And it's what Ahmed said, the financial services solutions that are available, the investment that is available, it's so specific that getting it is not something that we as Africans should count on. And if we're going to count on getting that money before we do something, in 100 years' time, our great grandkids, they're going to be where we were. So let's stop waiting for investment from America or Europe. Let's stop waiting for the government or the president to eventually die. You know, let's just look around us, put together people we trust and like, and say, let's solve this problem one product at a time and grow from there. I have a friend, she's based in Zim. She runs one of Zim's largest corn providers, right? They farm and they create corn products. But she started as a rural girl who used to collect corn from the rural areas on her own. And now, 20 years later, she runs one of Zim's largest agricultural companies, simply by just collecting leftover corn that wasn't wanted in the rural areas. You know, you don't need investment for that. Granted, it'll take a lot longer, but you in the process become a job creator, you become a wealth creator for your community, and you become a layer that adds to that social security that I was talking about earlier on, that is super important. So I mean, in terms of what I think we should do moving forward as Africans, is just look at the little things we can do. I mean, it's very hard to do something on your own. As Ahmed says, it's putting a lot on our shoulders. But you know what I can't do alone, I can do with myself and 7 other people that I know of. You can email Chirks and say, Chirks, can you help me connect me to people in this area? I have an opportunity in my community to develop, or to put together laptops. Can you help us find suppliers? Like, let's just talk to each other more and say, what can we do to create these little micro industries that are going to be a strong, stable foundation for us to bring the economy back to the local community, to bring money back to the local communities, and to bring safety and security back to our local community, so that we actually benefit from this promised growth that's going to happen in Africa. Because I assure you guys, if we're going to wait for American money and European money, they're going to bring the money and then they're going to continue to own those industries and take the profits back with them. So we won't even benefit from them being here. We're just going to end up in the same position we're in now, where we are largely a consumer-driven continent. Okay, so let's take back things, one little product and one little opportunity at a time, and start small, and start with a group of people that you know, that you trust and you kind of respect. And that's literally where I'm going to leave it for today.
Thank you so much, Lesani, for your amazing thoughts. Ahmed, if I may just quickly get back to you again. Ulusani basically talked so much about, getting young people to either engage government or go under them. on and creating micro industries and the likes. These things are usually driven by passion, and then we've seen so many young people across the continent, who are passionate, who are driven to develop innovative products. However, what we realize is that over time, these ventures or projects, because they're not centered around profit maximization, after a couple of years, they go under because of the issue of sustainability. As someone who has run Innovation Hub, what would you advise young Africans who are passionate about developing innovative products centered around impact? How can they remain in business and offer their services to Africans?
Thanks, Chooks, for that question. It's a really important one, and also checking the chat box. I really love the thread that we have over here with the lovely panelists, but also participants and the questions and the interaction. So I just take it from here, and it's basically, I know that we live in a world, or like basically in an environment, politically speaking, the systems are always encouraging youth to speak, but actually they are not listening in most of the cases. But that's why I so much believe in incremental change, and it's about leading actually by action. And this is what I like about entrepreneurship. It's not like hitting our heads over the wall, because we are not able to see the reality where we're because of the factors that we're off, but it's rather like reorganizing or restructuring ourselves and restructuring the resources that already have in a different way that could make sense and also could respond to what we face and suffer from. It's about like I always believe that across Africa we have a lot of amazing resources and huge untapped potential, but actually it's about the fragmentation. It's defragmented. It's not in one spot. It's not coming all together to make sense for what we face all together. So that's why I believe in the youth power in this regard. And that startups with purpose actually are the way to go here. There is a wide spectrum of definitions. If you speak here about social entrepreneurship, that comes actually with a misconception, because I've seen a lot of initiatives doing good for society, but actually still wearing the old paradigm for charity work, and they call themselves startups. And that's why I'll take a moment to redefine basically what we know, because I don't like using the term social entrepreneurship, as I maybe mentioned earlier, but rather impact-driven entrepreneurship or purpose-driven, because it's all about the why that drives us here, right? And the definition that I like about here, about the impact-driven or purpose-driven, is basically that these are the ventures that are being created with the intention of generating measurable social and environmental impact, as we all know, in addition to financial returns. So in a nutshell, it should be intentional. So we should be intentionally trying to do real good in terms of society, in terms of environment, and so on, not coming by coincidence. And the second thing, it's about the measurable. So we should be able to measure this impact and capture that kind of impact over time. And here it's about incremental change that is intentional. And if it's only those two elements, then we're speaking about philanthropy. But actually here we are speaking about entrepreneurship, right? So there it comes with a financial return. So if it doesn't come with a financial return, so it doesn't make sense from a sustainable point of view. Because here we are trying to make use actually of the wisdom and create opportunities that still are homegrown. So they make sense to those who created them, but are fair enough to benefit the wider community. So as a startup to survive here, you should have actually the social and financial values blended together, not discrete. And this is what I've seen, that when you discrete both of them, then at times of, for example, COVID-19, then you'll definitely focus only on the financial value, because the social value is not integrated in what you do. And this is what we see the capitalistic driven ventures are facing now. But if both of them are coming together, so you have this kind of autonomous change and the dynamic change that could happen to steer you into the right direction, regardless of the product that you used to produce. And given the current outbreak, actually no one can fully predict how the future would be, but the bottom line here is that nothing would go back to normal. I came across this kind of quotation that nothing would go back to normal because normal wasn't working anyway, right? So, and something to share here is that hope is not a strategy for entrepreneurs, especially for impact-driven entrepreneurs. Whilst as a startup leader and teams should always be positive about it, but also well prepared with different scenario planning and survival plans. So here it's about being realistic about these plans and communicating with all the stakeholders and being transparent as well. And this is what makes different. And communication here is the real magic. And as an impact-driven entrepreneur also, I think you should have the strong why that drives you and your company. And that's what mostly is needed these days. So survival actually comes because when this kind of friction between the social value and the financial value are very highlighted, that these should be blended together.
Hello, Ahmed. Are you still with us?
Yes. Yeah. Hello?
Please go ahead. Please proceed.
Yeah, so it's basically what I was saying as a recap is basically about the why that drives these impact-driven entrepreneurs should be the way to let them step up now and take the lead instead of just waiting for rulers or like political environments to take over. And I believe, like answering some of the messages on the chat box as well, it's about, so when you tackle the local challenges that you are facing as a social entrepreneur or like an impact-driven entrepreneur, instead of just copycatting what's being produced before or pushed in the market by the West, I would say it's about like responding to the local challenges. Then putting off the borders would not be a big challenge, right? Because you can easily communicate over the internet, and even the internet not working, then you have the power of the crowd, or the word of mouth actually, that used to be more powerful than social media even before. Yeah, and I leave it here like at that point.
Thank you so much, Ahmed, for your amazing thought as well. You made mention of innovation technology, which is the cost of our conversation today. And you would also agree with me that growing a digitally inclined population, requires strategic investment in key sectors by both government and private sector operators across the continent. These strategies could range from creating a responsive educational system, formulating policies for a digital economy, creating sustainable energy solutions, expanding digital infrastructure to optimize public-private cooperation, and most importantly, massive investment in infrastructure, especially in affordable access to the internet. Given that these digital infrastructure are not readily available in Africa, in what ways do you think young people, can brave the odds to learn and develop their digital skills to be globally competitive in a digital world? I would like Bruno to take this, and of course, Catherine as well to round it off with us.
Thank you very much, Chucks. I do appreciate that question. It is indeed an interesting time for young Africans across the globe. I think that these are some of the things that we can do. The first thing is investment in targeted education. I call this term targeted education based on the fact that Africans right now just basically learn everything. We go to school, we do geography, right, to literature, we do basically everything. But I think that if our educational system can be restructured or rearranged so that young Africans can have targeted educational system where at a very young age, they identify your love, they identify what pricks you, what interests you, and gears you towards that direction. It will go a long way into creating experts young experts in various fields across the continent. And this can also help to boost the technological development of the continent within a very, very short period of time. We also have to create a conducive atmosphere for investment. One of the things that young Africans lack is investment. We have all the bright ideas, like I said before. We have the vigor, we have the power, we have the creativity. But one thing is sure in business, money is the bloodline of business. Without money, be as rich as, be as creative as you want to be, you are going absolutely nowhere. But how do we get a conducive atmosphere? Most Africans will blame this on the government. But for me, if you ask me, I'll say the conducive atmosphere also has to play a part, the youth also have to play a part in creating that atmosphere. Take, for example, Zoix is creating an electronic factory to create our electronic devices in Johannesburg, South Africa, and not in Cameroon. And the reason is because Cameroon doesn't have a conducive atmosphere. The taxes are very, very high. There are no roads. And a lot of these situations force the company to create a factory in South Africa. What if South Africa did not have such a conducive atmosphere? That means that an African company will be, creating its devices in Europe or in America. And the American government and the European people, the American people will be the ones who are employed and benefit from this. So we should help our government. We should discuss with those we can talk with and see how we can create a conducive atmosphere for businesses to strive in our various countries in Africa. And one thing I would just say, looking at what UNECA and YALDA are all working towards for a united Africa, it also helps the young Africans to know that, okay, I can create whatever I want to create, maybe in Nigeria, sell in Morocco with absolutely no problem. So that is another point. And I also like to encourage the youth to look up to and try to convince the Africans in the diaspora to invest in them, to make some investment in them. And this only comes when these people in the diaspora, or even those within the country, are really convinced that what you guys are doing is serious. For example, we have a saying in Africa that a lot of young people just want to get money. Once you give in investment money, the next thing you see them is they are driving in the newest Volkswagen or the newest car in the market. But if we can convince people that the money you invest in me, you pass it through a regulatory body, and this money is used for the purpose of which you sent. And I think that this will go a long way to give the young entrepreneurs that push, that power behind them to say, okay, I have people who are putting faith in me. I have people who trust what I'm doing, and let me do my best to make sure that everybody goes home smiling. And so another thing we can do is that the youth can use both free and paid online resources to learn the newest technology, to learn about programming, to learn about creating devices. Some of these resources like codeacademy.com and udemy.com, you just need to pay a little bit of money. It's not too much. I've seen a complete course on satellite communication for $36. Which is, if you translate that, most of us in this forum, we eat that in a day or two, or even in an hour. I've seen young Africans sit in a bar and almost finish up the entire bar. So we can do more than that. A resource like YouTube is absolutely free of charge. People can go on YouTube and learn programming from A to Z. You don't need a certifications for any of these things. Since I've been in business jobs, nobody have asked me, Bruno, are you a certified ethical hacker? Nobody asked that. Nobody asked me, are you a certified programmer? All they want is, do you have a solution to my problem? And if you do, how much is it? How much am I paying you for that? And once the price is good, people are ready to do business with you. I would also like to talk about the creation of solutions for African problems. We as Africans need to tackle African problems the African way. I'll emphasize this, and I'll emphasize it again. Take, for example, the way the internet was thrown on Africans. A lot of us are finding it difficult to adjust to the internet because it's not done the African way. I was watching one documentary on BBC, and they said even in medicine, if an African man has a wound and you apply medicine to the wound and it doesn't hurt, The conclusion is it's not working. The medicine does not work. But that's an African mentality. That's an African man. Once the thing hurts, once the medicine hurts, he says, yes, then I'm receiving treatment now. So if we are creating solutions for Africa, we need to make sure that these solutions are designed with the view for the African people. And I think this will be a good edge for us. It will give you the distinctive edge, the difference, to make sure that, okay, even if this thing is patented somewhere else, this particular approach that you took is different. I rest my case for now, Chance. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bruno, for your amazing thought. Catherine, do you have a few things to add to what Bruno just said?
I do indeed. There's so much of what Bruno said that I'd like to echo. I think, yes, absolutely, digital infrastructure is lacking. I think what is important, though, is that everybody here, especially on this forum, either has a phone or knows someone with a phone. And I think the most important thing is that those people in a position to gain and share knowledge should step up to the plate and do that. The cream rises to the top when we all pull each other up to the top. And I think that, I wanted to focus on a couple of really practical examples of what everybody, not just the youth, can do to educate themselves. And bear in mind, I come from a fairly technical background. We do focus on AI and cloud innovation. So mostly my interests lie there. But, with the fourth industrial revolution coming and so many jobs opening up, you cannot go wrong by doing enough research in this field. And so I want to say that read everything and anything from a reputable source that you can lay your hands on. Make sure that you're well versed on the UN sustainability goals and the African Union's agenda for 2063 and what that could potentially mean, because ultimately every single one of those goals presents an opportunity to solve a problem, and you never know, you might be the person that actually has the solution to that problem. There are free courses out there, fantastic courses like Andrew Ng's course called AI for Everyone, which is available on Coursera free of charge. It's extremely popular. He also has one called An Introduction to Machine Learning, which, if you're more technically minded, is definitely worth looking at. Elite Data Science also has a bunch of courses that you can access. And there's so many incredible newsletters you can sign up for, that from people like Azim Azar, who do Exponential View, and actually also has a podcast available that Harvard Business Review backs, and it is potentially a more international view, but again, an ability to take what is happening outside of the world, kind of in the Western and even the Asian side of the world, and how can we apply that here? How do we look at the application for African problems, but using the technology and adapting it to suit our needs? I really do recommend Exponential View. The Association for Advancement of AI have student rates if you're able to motivate that you simply don't have the cash to pay for it. That access to that information is available. Similarly, you can create a Medium account and sign up for topics that you're interested in, whether it's biotech or medicine or creative topics, etc. I really do recommend that you look out for conferences. This one is a great example. Online conferences and even conferences locally, if you have the ability to go to bigger cities where they're being hosted. And often if you email those conference organizers and you motivate your case for why you want to be there and how you can potentially contribute, you may find they'll give you a discounted rate. There's some fantastic podcasts out there. That's the one thing that does remain free by and large. And there's some incredible African contributors, Asian contributors, and even American contributors. And again, for me, it's about ensuring that your paradigm shift comes from as many possible sources, that you're educating yourself on everything that's available and starting to look at it through a lens for how we can apply it here. Obviously, there are things like press announcements for scholarships. If you look at what the bigger organizations like Accenture are doing in partnership with the likes of Codex, where they're taking on board people who don't have degrees and who aren't necessarily technically minded or don't necessarily have a job at this point in time, and giving them free access to coding classes, etc. It's really going to be about what are you doing for yourself and how willing and hungry are you to learn and contribute. I think at the end of the day, it's about making sure that you are availing yourself of the resources that the internet offers that are available. And again, this doesn't have to be on the latest computer. if you do have a local library, if you're fortunate to live in territories like Rwanda or Kenya, where there really is a big focus on building up that infrastructure, you're lucky, and making sure that you share that. Teach yourself to be task orientated, not necessarily job orientated. Be more agile and adaptable, and don't think of technology as a threat, but rather as a way that, if you think of collective intelligence, how can humans and tech work together? If you think about it in the context of law, for example, if you were a lawyer doing discovery on a really big case and you had thousands of papers to read through, you can now use natural language processing for that. But a chatbot or a text recognition tool isn't able to argue a case to the judge or help get put an argument together on behalf of the defendant, etc. So think of what are the tasks that are human orientated, and of course teach yourself kind of to be a lifelong learner and to be adaptable. And I've mentioned it before, but look for the gaps between the fielders. What are the skills that you have, or what are the things you're passionate about that you're able to contribute to this economy? Because as every one of the previous panelists have mentioned, this is about us. This is not about standing back and trying to figure out what the West is going to do for us or what technology they'll send our way in terms of computers, etc. This is about us figuring out how can we use what is available to everyone, albeit not necessarily always accessible, but what is available and how we can use it. And at the end of the day, making sure that you're taking everybody with you on that journey. That's my contribution in terms of this question. Thank you, Chucks.
Thank you so much, amazing speakers. Right now, we'll be answering a couple of questions. Participants have expressed certain questions. I would like to call on a couple of them to ask them. Joshua, if you are still online, can you ask your question, please? And while asking your question, kindly introduce yourself first, your name and your country. Joshua, are you still with us? Okay, while we wait for Joshua to come back online, Tandy, are you with us?
Hi.
Hello? Tandy, are you with us? Okay, move to the next person.
Hi,
Mutsopa.
I am.
Okay,
Can you
Tandy,
hear me?
perfect. Please tell us your name and the
Hello.
country you're from.
Okay, my name is Tandiwe. I am from Botswana, and mine is, I don't know if to call it a question, but I was just thinking about how everyone is moving towards technology, and one of the things that I had noticed is that not in terms of learning resources and everything else that we're trying to leverage, not a lot of us have access to the internet, and even if we do, I don't know about other countries, but in Southern Africa, internet is really, really expensive. And so even if you're trying to advance yourself or you're trying to be more engaged with the world and trying to innovate around the fourth industrial revolution, one of the setbacks will be the internet. So that's just what I wanted to say.
Thank you so
Can
much.
I speak to the books, if you don't mind?
Okay, please.
Because that's something that, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please
Hello?
go ahead. Yes, we can hear
yes.
you.
So that's something that I actually faced from a slightly different perspective. When I was young, we were forced to study computer programming when it was, still DOS and all of that stuff many, many years ago. And I hated it, right? And everybody loved it, but I really, really hated it. And everybody was like, yeah, you've got to study computers and you've got to get in there because that's where, the future is there. And it actually made me feel ill prepared for varsity. And then when I got there, I found out I wasn't. And it made me feel ill prepared for work. And when I got to work, I realized I wasn't ill prepared. And the reason I'm giving you my personal example is because it kind of links to what you're saying. So for you, it's not that you don't have an interest, but it's that you just don't even have access, right? And what I want to say is that what I learned is that the first thing is, um, we might be going through the fourth, industrial revolution. However, the application of that will be very different in each market. Some of the most high tech solutions don't use high tech inputs. So, for instance, if you look at one of our speakers, he has a product that's SMS based, and SMS is like a very old technology, right? But he raised a valid point. 80% of Africans don't have access to the internet. So they can't download your fancy apps. So how do you communicate with them? So for us to merge the fourth industrial wave of technology with our environment is where the money will be made for Africans, and it's where the jobs will be created. So as much as you don't have access to maybe the courses that are available, or the maybe even the podcasts, because you can't spend your whole day downloading or whatever, it doesn't mean that you'll be excluded from participating in this next wave of development. If anything, it means that you're in a prime position to take whatever is available and apply it to your unique environment. Because whatever you're facing, the average of people like you around you is also facing. So whatever the solution will be that will be implemented won't come from somebody in San Francisco, right? They're thinking about stuff we've never even dreamed of, but that means that their solution is not implementable here. However, the little access that you have, the ideas that you have, because the mind is such a beautiful thing. It's the most intelligent organism, in our world. Your mind will be able to take whatever you do have access to and create a solution around that is implementable today. I have a lot of very intelligent business people around me. My business partner is super intelligent, and I always say to him, like, you are so smart, you are like in 2050 right now, and that's brilliant. But in Africa, where we are, or in our community, or in our consumer market that we're serving, they're trying to deal with a problem that your solution can't even speak to at this point in time, whether it's because they don't have the money or the technology is not widespread enough. So your unique problem also holds access to the unique solution, not just you, but to your community. So as much as you might feel it's a drawback, it is, but it also holds the access to the solution. So kind of think around, bearing in mind that what do we call this? We don't have enough access to internet in SA or static region. It's massively expensive. Maybe then, because there's a lot of free Udemy courses and other podcasts and all that stuff, maybe then the opportunities for you because I know you don't have money for internet, so you don't have enough money to create an educational hub, but then you go to your parents or you go to your community and you say, I need a loan from each of you of, I think you said in Botswana, so you want 1,000 pula from everybody. You're creating a little resource center in your mother's garage, and you're going to charge everybody 20 pula a day or a week to access these resources on the computers you bought. And in that way, you solve the problem of access to internet, you've created a little bit of employment, and you now have access to the educational resources that'll push not just yourself but your whole community forward. So once again, I'm going to stress, that the solution to our problems are not going to be imported from overseas. They're not going to be necessarily hindered by money per se. If we kind of think beyond the individual, which is you and your bank balance and your family's like personal resources, just spread yourself a little bit beyond where you are and what you currently have, and you'll find that you can create a solution that solves 7 of your problems in one project. So just change your perspective a little bit, and in doing that, you will find that there are little things we can do to move forward. Because I'm repeating myself, but Africa, if we're going to wait for money for stuff, we're going to get left behind in a painful way that maybe we can't correct even in 1,000 years. So we've got to now put aside the understanding we have of our limitations and kind of say, fine, I can't do it on my own. Can I do it with somebody else? I can't do it by myself. Can I do it via a partnership with another company? Or, you know, so just, I know it's hard and it's depressing when you've got 20,000 other things to deal with and school and family issues. But guys, no one's coming to save us. We have to lift Africa up ourselves, and we're the only people who are going to do it. Our parents are tired. They're paying bills. Not that they don't care, but they kind of don't care anymore. They just want to survive. So if we aren't the generation that changes things for the next generations, nothing is going to change. And we cannot wait for things to get better because somebody dropped the price of internet or somebody funded our business. We will stay where we are. We've got to push. And like I said, I know it's hard, but we've got to push to create those solutions, no matter how small the scale is that we start with.
Thank you so much, Elusani, for your amazing thoughts. Moving on to the next question, Musopa, are you still online?
Hi, Chooks. Yes, I'm online.
Please. Okay, perfect. Please introduce yourself, and then you can ask your question after that.
All right, thank you. So my name is Musopa, and I'm from Zambia. The first question I had has been answered by Hulusani. And so the second question I have is, well, when we talk about industrialization, we're thinking of global and regional value chains. But then with in the light of COVID, we've seen that so many borders are closing and a lot of them have already closed. So then how do we manage to bridge this gap that is now being created? Thank you.
Okay. I will direct the questions to Catherine. Do you have a response, please?
I do. So I think the first thing to remember is that at this point in time, yes, borders are closing. And I think that as everybody knows, it is a measure to flatten the curve. We don't necessarily know for how long those borders are going to be closed. And I think that's one of the scariest things about the situation we're in, is that there really isn't an answer for when this will peak or how, you know, even how it will affect us. We're starting to feel the impact of that, but not necessarily with a full understanding of what will come. I think a lot of good things, however, will come from this, right? And I think the ability is, as in fact, I don't recall who said it earlier on this call, but was the fact that we're going to have to start looking at creating things within our own borders first. I think Kulisane also alluded to this. And the idea that we're going to have to reshore a lot of things. We're going to have to reconsider supply chains. We're going to have to reconsider what infrastructure we do have and how we can capitalize on our existing infrastructure. You know, I look at South Africa. We used to have a fantastic railway line. It no longer is that. You know, people who are using public transport to get anywhere are constantly delayed. How can we take what we've got internally and upgrade it so that it starts working better, and again, not relying on outside support for that? So yes, this is a crisis we are facing now. It is also a crisis that will pass. And I think that if we can start refocusing our energy and changing our perspective to look for the opportunities, rather than starting just staring at this giant wall of fear and you know, economic downturn, etc. It really is going to be up to every single one of us to try and figure out what we can contribute and how we can change that. And I wish I could tell you that there's this magic bullet for this is how this will be solved. But I do think that the one thing that we will all emerge from is that even though we're not physically able to stand together, I think that as a world, and especially as a continent, we're going to be standing a lot closer by the time we've conquered this.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for your response. Joshua, if you're back online, could you ask your question in less than a minute, and then we can wrap it up with two other questions?
Thanks very much, Chuk. My name is Joshua Maure from Yalda, Uganda. And my question is, we see we're in the implementing phase of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And you find that some countries have ratified and also trying to implement the African Continental Free Trade Area, but others are not. For example, Uganda and Rwanda had a standstill on the borders, And we think that youth and ICT, could they be the solution to drive or to be a catalyst for creating the African Continental Free Trade Area? Thank you.
Bruno, would you like to answer the question from Joshua, talking about the AFCFTA and countries' implementation agenda towards it?
Yeah, absolutely. He has a good point, and I think that is expected. I think it's expected when even when the United States wanted to become what it is today, it wasn't easy. Not everybody was into it. I think my country, Cameroon, was one of those countries that took a very long time, day in, day out, studying the papers, making sure that every every T was crossed and every I was dotted. But when we look at technology, and on what we stand to gain in a free trade area in Africa, we can really see the need that most governments in Africa are going to accept this, because the benefits definitely outweighs the benefits definitely outweighs the disadvantages of it. So, sorry?
Ghana.
All right.
So have you studied their demographics?
So definitely, what I'm trying to say is, yes, of course, we're going to have people, we're going to have countries who will say, okay, we can't do this at this moment, we're not ready to do that. But across, if you look across it, a lot of states, African states and African countries have already put that into signing. We have countries like Ethiopia who have even made their borders completely open, if not of the virus, of the coronavirus. We will have a free visit to Ethiopia. You don't even need a visa as long as you're coming from any one of these African states. Coming to how technology can help this, I think that in a free and fair system where Africans can create technology wherever they are, we start seeing the benefits of technology that is created by Africans and that can be used across the continent. And this alone, for example, I have an example of a Nigerian, even though living in I think maybe Korea or Japan, I don't know which, who created an app, a social media app, almost like WhatsApp, but allows you to have a direct one-on-one call. That's called the soft talk messenger. And we see that Africans are buying this idea, not just because it was created by an African, but because he had the African approach to it. So a lot of countries are going to be opening their borders, going to be signing the free trade area, not because they just want to do it, but because they'll be seeing the development that youth from other African countries are making. A Cameroonian can create up something which perfectly suits them, the problem that a Nigerian is facing. And that already in itself is a huge boost, a huge push that this country should go ahead and sign it. So I'm very positive that even though Uganda and Rwanda, like you said, are having a border issue, these are things that can be resolved in a very, very short period of time.
Thank you so much, Bruno, for the thoughts. We are rounding up very soon. We will be rounding off with a couple of questions from Sabele Atta and Patricia. So Sabele, if you are online, please can you kindly ask your question before we move over to Patricia? Okay. Patricia, if you are on, please can you kindly ask your question, please? For want of time, we would really appreciate if your questions are very short, and of course, we will try as much as possible to respond within a minute or two, for want of time. Sebele, Patricia, are you on? Are you online? Okay, let's move over to Achen. Achen, are you online? If you are, kindly ask your question.
Hi, Chooks. Yes, I'm online. Thank you for the very insightful conversation, and the speakers have been very insightful as well. My question leverages on perception that the youth have.
Please, and sorry to cut you, Achen. Can you kindly introduce yourself, please?
My name is Achieng. I am Yelda, head of publicity. I'm from Kenya. So my question leverages the perception that the youth have and the need to have a perspective shift in as far as social entrepreneurship is concerned. So how, because we're seeing a lot of youth investing in ventures that don't necessarily address the need, and it's important to establish a link between the need and the solution. So how do we establish a shift, a perception shift that encourages the youth to invest or develop social enterprise that is geared towards development of social goods, or rather public goods that address specific needs within society? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Achen. I would like Ahmed to kindly answer that in a minute or less because of our time.
Thanks a lot. So basically, it's about like when we speak about social entrepreneurship or purpose-driven entrepreneurship, it's about like failing fast but also failing forward. So we are learning by doing, and we are moving forward and tackling challenges that are around us. So this is a culture that maybe we are not like grown up on, actually. So what we need to learn all is basically how to accept failure as an opportunity for learning. And actually, speaking about investment that was mentioned earlier, because I also do angel investment or impact-driven investment. So actually, in 2017, there was under $200 million invested in African tech companies across the continent, actually. And but like last year, it was more than $1.3 billion. So there is an investment capacity that is in the continent, maybe some of it coming from outside of the continent, but actually allocated for Africa. But actually, it's all about how people could step in and step up and take advantages of these things. So it's about teamwork, it's about paradigm shift towards being human-centric, and this is the opportunity actually these days to start thinking of how can we be part of the solution, but actually maybe how can we be the solution, if I answered your question briefly.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. Lastly, we'll be taking questions from Prince Fully. Prince Fully, if you are still online, please, can you kindly ask your question? But before that, please introduce yourself.
As a microphone, my question has to do with, is there with the prevailing situation?
Hello, Prince. Can you?
Regards to,
hello, Prince. Sorry to cut in. Can you kindly introduce yourself first?
Sir, my name is Prince Nascimento Foley from Liberia, and my concern has to do with the prevailing situation where COVID-19 is encroaching on the continent of Africa. Is there any low-level tech or technology that has to do with data collection, especially mobile data collection?
Okay, Prince Fully, if I got your question correctly, you're asking about the capacity of African countries to engage in data collection, right, during this COVID-19 situation?
Sure.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that question. Catherine, I don't know if you could just spin this in less than 2 minutes, given the fact that you have vast experience in data and analytics and the likes.
Of course, so I might just repeat what I mentioned earlier. There's actually a company called Zindi, Z-I-N for Nelly, D for dog, I, Zindi, who've actually just in the past couple of weeks signed up 12,000 data scientists to try and see whether there is an opportunity to collaborate. I'm also seeing an extensive amount of transparency in terms of the data being shared, both locally and of course abroad. Unfortunately, I'm under NDA for one of the projects, but I can tell you that there is a big move to make data sets available, and to make the challenges very clear so that anyone who does have the ability or interest to contribute is able to do so. I sincerely recommend that you keep an eye open both on your local governmental website. I know in South Africa we have a website dedicated to COVID-19 and challenges are being posed there. And then of course any communities that you're tied into. If you feel you have skills or you're able to contribute in any way, be it from home or in person, this is a problem that we face as a world. So yes is the answer to that question. I think you're going to find there's a lot out there when you start doing research. A final resource to consider, which definitely is the global resource at the moment, or one of them at least, is the Johns Hopkins website. If anything, go there and see how you can contribute country by country, especially in your own.
Thank you so much to our amazing speakers for your time. We really appreciate your insightful contribution today. At the same time, thank you so much for those who are able to attend, our participants. We are grateful you're able to join. And we hope that you've gained so much by attending today's webinar. Definitely, the recordings of today's webinar will be made available probably next week. And then, of course, anyone who is interested in listening can go over it and either make notes or keep them for record purposes. Once again, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate your time. And thank you so much and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
George, thanks for hosting. Thanks the guest speakers. Been
Thank you,
really
the host.
insightful.
Appreciate. I learned a lot today on the host. It's the three speakers. We hope to continue and learn more from you guys.
Thank you everyone for attending this webinar. Thank you so much, Yadala Pure. Thank you so much. Hope all of us can implement what